Hello, and today I want to talk about how to use Shiny with Google Analytics R and show you a demo of how that works and just build it up from a very simple app which just gives you Google Analytics data to an app which will talk through all your Google Analytics data. And this is prompted by Shiny Appreciation Month, which is running this month, and I really do appreciate Shiny, so I thought I'd do this. And this is, I'm going to use this as the basis of the video today, and this is a app I put out about a month ago. And so all the code is going to be on there, and I'm just basically going to walk through this, how to do that. And the end result is this app which talks and pulls in your data and things like that. And Shiny has definitely been very important for me for using R. It's basically the reason that Google Author came about, because I needed client dashboards that would work with all the different libraries. And it originally started with a library that was based in RGA by Broad, which was the sort of one of the first Google Analytics libraries in R. And then this library called Shiny GA that I built on top of that one. And then that sort of matured into Google Analytics R, and Google Author sort of split up onto its own so that it could handle the authentication and Shiny stuff. So I'll sort of show how that all kind of interacts. Okay, so let's get to it. We'll start in a RStudio project. Always create a new RStudio project, and we're going to do a new Shiny app. Now, when you're creating a Shiny app, you can go to New and click on this and call it a name, and you get choices between a single file where UI and server are in the same file, or a multiple file. And generally, most of the time I'm using multiple files when it's a big Shiny app, just because it's easier to manage and all that. But for these purposes, because it's quite a small app, we're just going to do a sort of single file one. And so you can call it a name and click on that, but we'll just sort of create one here. So here we are with a bare minimum sort of framework skeleton for a Shiny app. And the key elements here is that we've got a UI, which generates the HTML for the Shiny app, and the server, which is deciding what the HTML will output. And then at the very bottom, this is the last thing that's executed when you run. You're going to get the Shiny app. And if you run that, you'll get nothing because there's nothing to show, but at least it works. Okay, so but for our purposes, we're going to use, we want to authenticate with Google Analytics and pull that data in. So at the very least, we're going to need Google Author, which is like handles all the authentications and things like that. And then we're going to set the client scope. And this is a Google project that you should create. If you don't, you'll have to rely on the default one in Google Analytics R, and that's if you're doing Shiny, then you're gonna need to have your own Google project. So we'll walk through how to do that. So at the very least, when you're kind of looking around, you need to create your Google project, and you'll make a name up here. And you don't necessarily need billing if you're just using Google Analytics, but we will need billing for the Google Language R library later on. So this has billing attached. And you've got various client IDs that you can create. And these are sort of identifying that it's your project that you want to authenticate with. And the sort of key ones that we want is you're going to create a client ID, and you can do that at the top here. And you want the type other if you're authenticating offline, and that's for normal sort of use when you're just using it in your browser. But for Shiny in particular, we're going to want a web application one. So you have sort of two distinct ones there. And these are distinct from the service account keys, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But because they're like actual getting access to your data. This is just the app that's the data's going to run through, if that makes sense. And once you create these, then you get the option down here to actually download that JSON file. That's what I've done here. I've downloaded this web application ID. And then this is a function from Google Author, which basically sets the client and sets all the details that you need to work with it. So by default, it's looking for an environment file, GAR client web JSON. You could supply the file path directly here, but it's more convenient to put it in an environment. So now here's my environment file, and I put it actually in the folder with this app because I want to sort of publish this app later. Though you could have it in your home directory. I've got one there as well, and that's for when I'm doing it offline and at home. But if I'm actually wanting to publish this app, then I'm going to have to publish this as well, so that it will know where all the files are. And we will cover this bit a bit later, but this is the file that I've downloaded and put into a GAR client web JSON, and that's in this folder here for the purposes. So basically what this line does is that it takes that client JSON and says this is the project that you want to be going with. And then also remember that if we're you have to activate the analytics library as well, so make sure that when you go there you've got API enabled. If not, click it on, and then your project will be able to accept Google Analytics requests. So yeah, so once we've got all of that, then now we actually want to sort of get the authentication button up. So this is the GAR auth. Now I'm actually using the JavaScript authentication here because it's just sort of sometimes more convenient. We just take a quick look at that right now. You can see it basically makes a login button, and yeah, that's what this module does. It won't do anything yet because we haven't set it up, but for those purposes, when you're looking at the credentials for your web client, if you click through here, then you're going to have these authorized JavaScript origins. And because we're using the JavaScript version, then we need to fill this in. If you're using the other version where you just need redirect URLs, then you can just stick with those ones. But for the JavaScript one, you need to fill this one in. And this doesn't accept IP addresses. So you can't put in 127.0.0.1, which is the normal home one. But that is localhost is the equivalent of that. So if you put in localhost, then you will be able to authenticate with the JavaScript. And then you also need to set the port number that you're going to be doing, and 1221 is the one I kind of use. And you can set that if with your options, options shiny port, like that, 1221. And I have that set in my at the very start. Now you don't need this if you're not doing a local host. If you're doing it in just a bare a normal web address, then it will be port 80, which is the normal HTTP port. But for these purposes, we need to sort of specify the port. Yeah, the one annoying thing is that when you actually launch Shiny like this, if you put that in the browser like this, if you run external, then it actually triggers it on 127.0.1. So what I do is I actually just change this to localhost like that, and that's exactly the same. So what I do is I run this in the viewer pane here. So that's what I'm doing here. If you run it, it appears in the viewer pane, and then I just have localhost here, and that because that server is started by that process, then when you refresh this, then this is there as well, and this accepts the JavaScript origin. So that's good for local testing. When you're like published in online and all this, then you'll just put in the web address of where you need to get authentication from. In this case, this is my Shiny Apps account example. So hopefully that's you can sort of see how it all fits together. Yeah, so what we've basically got to the situation now, this is just making the UI But if we actually need to make it do something, then we need to put in the module which uses this UI and creates the authentication token and everything like that. So if we stop that and run, it won't work from there because of the thing, but if we refresh this one and you push login, login screen. So we've got, and we can see it hasn't done anything yet, we just know it's sort of worked in that respect. So once you get that far, then pretty much that's the hard bit over. It's a pain that the hardest bit is first, but that's the way it works with APIs. So yeah, one other thing, we've set the scopes here. So the scopes is what we want to authenticate with. So we've got analytics read only because that's all we need. If you go to the plugin here for Google Author, then it gives you a sort of list of all the scopes that you need. So if we look at for analytics in here, analytics reporting, then you can see it's analytics read only and analytics if you want. So yeah, it sort of gives you the list of what you need there. So so now we've got the authentication tone. That's all this token. That's all that this code does at the moment. But now we actually want to get sort of data and accounts and things like that. So, but first of all, let's just finish our UI. So we've only just got a login button at the moment, but let's actually add some things that we actually want to see. So this is going to be a very, very basic app for the moment. What we're doing here is we're going to use another module now called Auth Dropdown UI, and that's something that's from googleAnalyticsR. So we're going to load that library here. So this will load that library, and I'm calling this before Google Analytics-R so that it uses your project rather than the default one that's in there. If you've set it before you load the library, then it'll use your one. And so now this is sort of the entirety of our basic plot. And so if we run that, then you can start to see that we're getting some more useful stuff. Go back to that. And you can start to see now we've got the auth drop down is basically giving you this interface where you can select your Google Analytics ID. And the date picker is a shiny default thing where you can select the dates that you want to see the data from. And by default we're saying look 300 days in the past, but you can change all of that. And these and the bit in columns here just make sure that it goes across the page rather than down. But your preference, pick your preference. And the plot output is the trend plot. Well, there's nothing to plot yet, so it's there, but it's just not doing anything. So now we need to actually populate these UI elements with data. So we've got the authentication here, but now we actually want to pull in the GA accounts. I'm cheating a bit because I've got this all on another page, but here we are with GA accounts, and that's you have to wait till you've got authentication, but then once you've got it, then we're using this with Shiny function to wrap the GA account list, which you use normally offline. We do this so that we can pass in the authentication token within the session. So you always have with Shiny, the first argument is the function, and then you always have the Shiny access token parameter. And if there's any other arguments you need to pass to this function, then they sort of follow here, but there's none for this one, so we can just leave it like this. So that will give us the accounts, and then the actual view ID, so we can output what the view ID has been chosen, is used by this module here, and that takes as an input the GA accounts table, and it uses that to populate the view ID. Okay, so we've got the view ID now. When we look at we can fetch in the data, and we've got all the accounts here, and the output of this module will be the view ID that you've got here. And that's what will be represented by this element, which is a reactive element in Shiny. So now we actually want to get the data from Google Analytics. And this is in a similar format to the GA accounts here, where we need to wrap it with Shiny and pass in the Shiny access token. But now, because we're getting a more complicated function, then we need to add in more arguments. So here we're requiring that we need the view ID to be present, and we've got a date, and this just prevents sort of nulls and red things whilst it's loading and things. And then we wrap the function with this with Shiny from Google Author, and then the first argument is the Google Analytics function, and then we pass in all of the arguments that that function needs. The first one is view ID, and then you need to start naming these really. I mean, this should be named really. Yeah, you name all the arguments that are passed to this function. And this we're doing very simply. We're just saying the date range is going to be what the input is coming in from Shiny, this date range here, date picker. We're just sticking it to be date for the dimension, and the metrics is sessions. We're sort of hard coding these in, but these can very well come from other inputs, and that's definitely used in other Shiny apps around. And then we want all the data, so we're doing max there. But every function that uses with Shiny always needs to have the Shiny access token as well, and that is passing in the authentication token that has been created by this module up here. Yeah, so that's necessary for every with Shiny function. So now we have the data. We put it in the reactive because it's good practice to have your API calls separate from your output. So now we need to use this reactive and actually use it to output data so we can see it. And this will only trigger when you have an output, because that's the way Shiny works. So the trend plot we've got here, we're just going to render a plot. It's going to wait until it sees this data is ready. It's not null. I always tend to do this just because it makes the error messages easier. If something goes wrong, then it's much easier for R to say what's happened with this rather than this, which is a sort of reactive function, which can be confusing. So I just usually just rename reactive data at the top there, and then it's plotting it a typical line chart. And then that's it for this simple one. So just going over that, we've got this module here that does the authentication. That's these two. Then we have a column which does another module which does the accounts web property in select view. Then we've got the date range picker, and then we've got the plot coming out, and that is it. So now if we stop that, run that again, and look here, and refresh that. So now we should have all the elements together. So if we log in, okay, and there we have data. So if we just go to my blog, and you can sort of stick around, you can sort of change these dates, and every time you're changing these elements, then the reactive data here, the GA data is changing. So every time you change the view ID or the date picker, then it has to recalculate this, and that's what you want. So yeah, so now we have a basic Shiny app that's pulling in data from Google Analytics. So that's all well and good, and yeah, there's lots and lots of things you can do on top of that, but hopefully if you can get that far, then you're pretty much done the hardest bit, which is authentication and getting your data. And now you just need to make it pretty and add statistics on top of it and things like that. So now I'm going to move on, and I'm going to say build on top of this one where I want to actually describe the data. I want the app to actually talk to me and say, this is the data that you have coming out of your Google Analytics account. And it's a bit of fun really, but it's just basically just using this new library which I've been working on recently, and this is calling the Google text-to-speech API. So this is using googleAnalyticsR, and this does translation and things like that as well. You can actually make it speak to you in French as well if you want, but for now we'll just like do this. So we've got googleAnalyticsR, and that's what we're going to do. So how do we sort of modify this to make it work with Google AnalyticsR and googleAnalyticsR? Well, the first things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to change these scopes, because we need to have scopes that work with the language API as well. So if you actually, I'll just demonstrate that I know what it is, but we'll just sort of, you go here and then look for what is it, speech. There you can sort of see that it says, oh, you need the cloud platform scopes for that one. So we'll put that in here. Okay, so that's the first change you need to do. Also need to load the library. Now, what we're doing actually is two different types of authentication here. The first authentication will be the shiny one, where people will be able to log in through the app to see their own data. But the actual language, googleAnalyticsR, is going to use our authentication for our app, separate from that. But that's because it's a paid service, and it needs its own authentication to do that. So what we're going to do is use my Google project. In your case, it'd be yours, and that's because it's linked to a credit card and things like that. And you can see this on the googleAnalyticsR setup page, how to do this, but basically it involves, what we need to do is download, go back here. So here we have the credentials, which is these client IDs are just describing the project that the data will go through, whereas these service account keys, I've got to be careful not to show too much here, but the service account keys are actually authenticate, and this will give you access to data. So that's what I don't want to show you exactly. But basically, when you create these service account keys, you get a one-time only download of the authentication details, and that's another JSON file. And then you put that in as specified by the library how to authenticate. So for googleAnalyticsR in particular, it suggests that you put it in a GL auth environment argument, and that's what you may have seen earlier. That's what this one is doing here. Don't know why that's there. GL auth is the JSON file, one-time JSON file that and if that ever gets compromised, then you could lose data and all that. So you need to be very careful that you don't expose that on the internet. So for this, because this is on GitHub, this project, but what I've done is put all the sort of sensitive stuff in this auth file. The web credentials isn't that sensitive; it's just the app. Yeah, I don't know, yeah, but keep it safe anyway. But definitely the authentication ones you want to keep, because otherwise people got access all your data. You can go to the interface here and delete stuff if you ever get compromised and things like that. But just you have to be careful. So what I do for this is that we use the git ignore and just make sure that the off file here, off folder, is not ever checked into GitHub, because even if you do it by mistake and then delete it later, it'll be in the history of GitHub. So you really never want it to go up there. And I've also put the R environment in here, which is this file, just so I don't know. But yeah, you could have a lot of other sensitive stuff in here. There's nothing sensitive here. It's just pointing to files. But yeah, it's just good practice to hide that as well. Yeah, so once you've done that, now you also have to make sure that you've activated the language API. So just check that, text to speech, keep forgetting. Yeah, so Google text to speech, and it's enabled here. If it's not, you just click that button and then it'll be enabled. So so that's that. Yeah, so now how do we actually adapt this so that we're going to talk through what's going on? Now, the first thing, I actually just nicked this from a Stack Overflow question. But I noticed when I was creating the talking that if you're doing numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, you actually want the ordinals first, second, third, fourth, and because it just sounds nicer when it's being spoken back to you. So this is a function that will take a number and put first, or nund, or rund, or th on the end of it, so that when it's spoken back in conversation, it sounds more natural. So that's just something I got from this link here. And so we need that later on. So I'll just put that at the top of the Shiny app, just so that it's available to all the functions down that. Maybe I should put that in the library itself, I don't know. It's just there now. So now we're still going to need the authentication here, so we keep that, and we still need all these elements. So really the only difference we're making to the UI at the moment is that we're going to add these two lines. And this is a Shiny module which is creates the web player to talk back the audio. And this is just going to be the text that we're creating so that we can actually see, in case you can't hear the audio or something, and see what it's saying. So what we need to do is actually now activate these so that we can see some data come through. So the server, we're just keeping it all the same, but now we just need to add some functions that are going to sort of create this output. So we go down here, and here's one I prepared earlier. Classic Blue Peter-esque. There we go. So yeah, so this is cheating a bit, I'm sorry, but this was actually the longest part of creating this app, was creating the string that you wanted it to talk, and it's really just sort of style, really, and this is where you kind of want it to be in the style of what you're doing. I'll just sort of describe what I've done. So once you've got the data and the data picker and you've turned into this, what I'm first doing is turning the dates into human dates, and you can do that with this formatting here. So, and basically this is a format of which makes it more human sounding. So if I just put in today's date, say, you can see it turns Friday, June, when it's actually 22nd of June, and it's a Friday. So it just adds the sort of human language to a date, which is usually just machine language like that. And then we're using this function that we defined earlier to add the ordinals to the actual days, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So that's all in these two columns now. And then actually do some statistics, and as you know, as normal, it's just like one tiny little line in the not the rest of it. But this is basically getting the trend of the data, and it's going to say if it's going to be trending up or down, or if it's just staying stationary and things like that. So you can deparse that as you go. It's doing a linear regression on this data. And then this is just a massive paste. This just makes a massive string for it to talk out. And it's for the period covering 1st of June to the 3rd of blah, blah, to the most days. So it just gives you the maximum number for that period, the minimum number for that period, and the trend. And what you put here is up to you. This is kind of what I've worked on here, but you know, anything you want, as long as you can kind of pull it out of the data. So that just generates a string. So now we've created this string of text. We actually want to output it to the Shiny text output here. So we need to create, so this is all the reactive thing here. So to call that, we actually just need to make an output of the text analysis. So this renders the text, and it just waits for this transcript we've just made, and then outputs it straight back again to this text analysis, and doesn't do anything to it. So if we run that and show it here, there you go, and then yeah. So here we have it. Now we have the sort of text that we want to be spoken, and it gives us sort of all of that. And I worked on that quite a lot, just to get all the pauses and commas and things like that in the right place. But you know, all in good fun. So now we actually want to do the talking. So this is relatively simple. Actually, for when I was developing this app, I added some stuff to googleAnalyticsR to make this more simple. Basically, it's calling this transcript, this reactive transcript, and then you can set if you want to see the controls or not by this. And then these are functions that are passed to this to GL talk which is a new function in googleAnalyticsR here. And there's you can specify the gender, the name, audio. It's really good, really. Yeah, so now we should have everything in place, and we're setting the gender to female here. So if I run this again and log in again.
For the period covering
Saturday,
August the 26th to Friday, June the 22nd. The most daily sessions was 64 on Wednesday, May the 9th. The lowest number of daily sessions was 1 on Monday, December the 25th. The overall mean average was 9.64. Overall, the trend is upwards with a change of 0.3 sessions per month.
Okay, and so it's basically made this audio controller here. And then it's talking this thing. So every time you make a change to this, so if I change to there, then that will update.
For the period covering Saturday, August the 26th.
Good to turn them down every now and again. Yeah, but you can see that it's creating this. And if you want to actually, I think if you set controls to false, and we can make this male just to show how you're doing. We'll run that. Refresh. Login.
For the period covering Saturday, August the 26th to Friday, June the 22nd.
Hits them out, but we can't turn them down. So I've just got my stereo over here that I can do that with. Yeah, so now we have a talking app. Isn't that awesome? So what we would like to do, so just reviewing what we did basically. We added the client scope for googleAnalyticsR. We authenticated with googleAnalyticsR with the JSON so that it comes with the app. And then we had this function that changes first, second, thirds to ordinal numbers. We added the modules and the text analysis here. And then we made this transcript and called this module to actually create the HTML player that talks the transcript. So that's that. And now basically I just want to sort of make that pretty. So we're going to move on to how we do that. And yeah, so this I think the hard work, this is just sort of fun stuff really, where you just sort of tweak it and make it look nice. So for these purposes, I'm going to use this Gintella Shiny thing I did a couple of years ago now, which is this this library here. And basically what I did, I just looked for dashboards on Google, and the top one was this Gintella HTML template here. No, not that. This one, this bootstrap one here, which is this, and it's top of Google. And then I was looking at you do Shiny HTML templates, and so instead of the sort of default Shiny that we all know and love, you can basically add a sort of HTML template with your own CSS and all this. So so what this package is basically it's taken the Gintella Shiny, the Gintella bootstrap theme, and RFI'd it by putting all these templates in. So these are called R code, and then it's got all the sort of CSS and JavaScript that this Gintella uses. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. Gintella. Yeah, but anyway, it looks nice. So I use it quite a lot. But if you want to modify another sort of any HTML page, it's actually relatively simple to do. So look at the sort of how this was done in this one, and you can use it for so you can make Shiny apps look like anything really, which is really nice. So we use this as in the library. You have to download this from GitHub because it's not on CRAN or anything. So you can follow that link later. But yeah, so we're going to keep everything the same because we're not changing data now. We're just changing how it looks. So that's all simple enough. Now, the way it works is that instead of this fluid page, which is sort of the default shiny thing, then we're going to add this Gentilla page. I've never said that out loud actually, so that one. And yeah, and that will add all the sort of HTML template that we've got. And then it's got sort of various things that you can add. Now, what I've done in this one is I've moved this authentication into this sidebar element, so it looks nicer. It's more useful. So I'll just get rid of that one because we've got this one here instead. So that's gone into this sidebar element. And you can add a title. You can add an icon to the title, and made in Denmark, 2018. So that's all in there. And then it also has these different ways of displaying graphs and things like that. So instead of let's just check. Yeah, so the way it works, so you've got these named things up here. You can add tracking as well if you like, and then for every row in the page, then you add another shiny element in here. So that will be in the first row, and then this will be in the second row. And it's got a date picker thing at the top. So instead of the date picker being on its own here, we'll put it in the top there. We'll see it in a minute. And then we're going to actually, instead of using this plot output, which is the sort of default plot output, we're going to use digraphs, which is this nice JavaScript library for showing time series graphs. And you can zoom in and out and things like that. It's much more interactive and cool. So we'll put that in. And then the last thing is, instead of just showing this text output like this, we'll put it in a dashboard box here, just so that we've got it, you know, looks nice. So if we run that, what's that mean? Oh, that's just because that's too small. If we refresh this page, so you can see now that it's a lot more stylized. This is just because I've got too small a screen at the bottom. But you can see now, and it's also reactive as well, so it works on mobile phones better as well, and all that. So this is a sort of default, and you see the date picker has moved into here, and if we scroll down, we've got a box that's going to go around our transit. So this is just what the UI is. So that's it for the UI now. We'll change it. And remember, the UI just makes HTML. That's all its functions to do. So actually, if you just run, yeah, you can do this, yeah. Stop that. All these functions, in theory, should just output HTML. That's all that the UI does. And then it's the server that actually does the changing that HTML via JavaScript. And that's the magic of Shiny. So now we're going to move on to the server functions. And so these are all relatively the same. These are all the same because it's the same data coming in. The only thing we're going to change is this trend plot. We're going to make this a rendered digraph instead, like that. And then digraph, we'll just make sure we put those libraries at the top. So yeah. So you've got digraphs, and then XTS is a library that deals with time series, and it just puts it into a format that's easy for digraphs to display. So now we're changing this GA data into a time series, an XTS thing, and that's just because it works nicely with digraph. So that's gone into digraph, and digraph will add all the interactivity and things like that it's got. And then I think that is all it. So if we now run that down there, yeah, don't get any errors, it's always good. And yeah, so now we've got this, you see all the formatting, the title of the page. It's Google Analytics Talk here. And we log in. Okay. And we get this nice zoomable digraph. And we didn't do anything really, we just gave it to digraph, and digraph does all this business here. I've turned it down.
On Monday, December the 25th.
Here the
The
transcript.
overall mean average was 9.64. Overall, the trend is upwards with a change of 0.3 sessions per month.
Thank you. So yeah, so that's covers pretty much everything I wanted to cover, I think. Just reviewing that, we use this Gentile Shiny to make a UI theme, but you can use any HTML theme out there. You just need to adapt the HTML and Shiny and put it into the template. And then that uses this function which adds all these sort of elements, cosmetic elements. A lot of the work is just done on the UI end this time. We didn't have to change any of this server stuff really, which is really nice. So yeah, it means that you can swap around things really nicely. So yeah, I think that's it. It's been a much longer video than I expected, but if you would like to see this in completion, that's in this verbal GA Shiny there, and hopefully with this video I'll maybe put this links to this repo, then you should be able to very easily get a talking Shiny app for yourself and use it, and just take this as the start, go with it and do something else with it and make it cool. All right, I'd love to hear what you're doing with it, and thanks very much for your time. Okay, bye.